Good morning, everyone. This is Randy at Central Region Headquarters. Thanks for joining this week's version of the Wednesday guest speaker series. Today we have Patrick Ide, who's the Sioux in Duluth, providing a presentation, Radar Down, Severe Risk Up, and he will be joined by WC and Joe Moore. Thanks very much, guys, for being willing to come on and share your material. And I will just turn it over to you to take it away.
Alrighty, sounds good, Randy. Appreciate it. And yeah, so it was an interesting event on the 726, probably one of our bigger events of the year, and without our primary radar. So we thought we'd kind of share some of our experiences with that. This isn't meant to be a massive deep dive Meso A deep science presentation, more so kind of just some philosophies, methods, and kind of best practices, what we learned from it all, and especially as we kind of applied that to, we're trying to modernize kind of our severe weather operations. So we'll kind of put that disclaimer up front. At least half of the title, right, Severe Threat Up, is, yeah, 726, we saw just kind of this steady march from day 3 to day 1 of steadily increasing our severe risk across our portion of the Northland here. And, you know, nothing overly dramatic about it other than, you know, just the usual, you know, forcing and capping uncertainties, just kind of, hey, things that happen with every severe event, right? So getting prepped, getting ready to go for it, and then radar problems. So around 2 p.m., our radar went down hard, and I got to tell you, our ESA up here, David Schwemline, tireless efforts to be able to try to get that radar back up. At about 5 p.m., after about 3 hours of being out there, it was pretty clear that it was not going to be coming back up. And so, you know, that's where we were really able to, you know, set up our operations for, hey, we're not going to have a primary radar. And so it gave us the time to recognize that hey, we need to get our AWIP set up right. That we need to make sure we adjust our radar procedures, that we need to get our staffing in place and the assignments as well, and we'll go a little bit into that. And David, he kept going, he kept trying his hardest, and finally we had to go out and get him and say, hey, the time's up essentially for your safety. The storms are inbound to Duluth, and being in the radome with a bunch of lightning is probably not optimal. So a quick overview of what happened. We had 25 warnings, and we got to, you know, cover a sizable chunk of real estate there. So starting from our Minnesota Lakes country and marching all the way into northeast Wisconsin there. So a total of 25 warnings. Always the wrinkle for us is there's always marine as well, covering the western third of Lake Superior. So making sure that our warnings setups are taking that into account as well. So about 8 hours, 6 p.m. to 2 a.m. of warning ops. There was a brief break in there, and overall, hey, not too bad, really. You know, 80% POD, 30% FAR. We take that on a day when we had all systems functioning normally. So this is kind of a brief overview of that. And it wasn't really marginal severe either. We had a couple of 3-inch hailers. One of our bigger towns up in northern central Minnesota was out without power for a couple days. And here's the mesh tracks that Joe Moore grabbed, and a color on there, long, and also, you know, pretty much covering most of our areas, about as long as you can get for severe weather from northwest to southeast across our CWA. So it certainly was a challenge, right? Thanks to Joe Moore and his technical prowess for the next few slides. And Joe, if you have anything to add, feel free to jump in. But here are the 200-mile range rings from our surrounding radars. And if we go back with some of these mesh tracks, you can kind of get a sense where they are. So they're starting from right here, and then they kind of transition closer into the zone of where we're really, really far away from everything. So that's certainly, there's only so much help Mayville can give us. There's only so much help Minneapolis can give us. And it takes a while until Green Bay or Marquette can be of much help. So it really changed the way we approach things, right? So there's the big range rings from from Mayville, and 120 nautical miles is the closest as we're going to get basically to that. And very quickly you surpass 200 miles. Minneapolis provides a little bit more help, but you get too far up into our iron range here up in northeast Minnesota, and you very quickly, especially where some of the storms were pretty close to, you get past 200 miles. So a lot, really far away from all of our neighboring radars, right? So, well, there's MRMS, right? But so here's the MRMS RQI, and a couple things here is really the need for Canadian radar data in AWIPS. There was, some calls, and some inklings of gears turning of getting some of that data fully into AWIPS. Still not there yet, but boy, it'd really be a tremendous help if we kind of had those drop-down menus like we have for our other dedicated radars. Boy, that'd be a big help. It really would, because MRMS doesn't take into account the upgraded S-band radar, so that it really doesn't fill in the hole where we really needed the data. And so while MRMS was an option and provided some help, just of where we are, being on the international border, and not ingesting the upgraded S-band Canadian radars, really didn't provide us a significant help. So this gets into a few things, is risk management versus risk aversion, and really adjusting your confidence thresholds for issuing the warning. It's easy to warn on red or purple or white or whatever your worst colors are on your color map that you use, and so it's okay. We're not just going to warn on red, but we're going to try to intentionally or intelligently warn on red. So that's a nice saying. That's nice, but okay, what does that actually mean? So I think it gets to a modified rule of 2 out of 3 that came from the TWIP, right, of radar, environment, and satellite, or radar, environment, and reports. That, foundational stuff here. And I think for the most part, where does satellite fit in? Probably fits in generally with environment, although you can kind of use it in a pseudo radar type approach. But boy, when we lose that primary radar and being so far away from our other radars to lend us a whole lot of help, and to not have that Canadian radar, I really think we blow up the bubbles of environment and reports, right? We still have that, and I think you transition satellite into more of just its standalone, kind of taking the place of radar, supplementing where you can at 150, 200 plus miles away from your neighbors. And so again, risk management versus risk aversion. If we're just averse to all risk, it'd be in this situation, warn on everything and everything gets a warning, right? And that's probably not, we can probably do better than that. So it's really going to get into trying to manage our risk with the information that we have. So, kind of my, as I look back on this, it's, how do we adjust our confidence thresholds for warnings? Well, severe, hey, as we'll show, we're, in the next few slides, the environment highly favorable. So, hey, if something's jumping out at you on satellite and you have some, in quotes, some distant radar signal, jump on it. And, we can recalibrate on reports if we need to. TORs, which we did have to do, always gonna be tough, right? Always. And with your primary radar down, and especially for our neck of the woods being so far away from any of our other radars, boy, environment and proactive reports, letting probably those reports take precedence and nudge you. Marine, probably a little easier. The criteria is so much lower at 34 knots and pennies for hail. So, most convection is probably going to need a special marine warning, and kind of following our SVR approach. So, I don't know, Joe, did you have anything before we dive into a little bit more Meso at this point, or?
No, keep on going. I'll hold my comments to the end.
For better or worse, I guess. 10-4. Thank you, Joe. Okay, so actually, in a way, not having your primary radar, maybe it's actually simpler. It forced us to be simpler. And maybe it was simpler in some ways. You just had so much less data to work with. And just keep it simple, right? And the big thing is knowing the environment and starting that mesoanalysis up early. We started it that morning, well before we knew the radar was going to be gone, but starting it early. And boy, steep lapse rate's a lot of shear. That should really set us up for don't overthink this kind of thing, right? That keep it simple on those foundational conceptual models. Steep lapse rates, lots of shear. Okay, you're checking a lot of boxes there. You can go to more detail on some things, but just the basic stuff there, checking boxes. See that we have this EML over us, and we're kind of going to be on the gradient of that EML. Things tend to happen there. So again, try not to necessarily overthink it. This is some screen captures that I dug up from our telework Meso A chatting from that day. And actually very grainy, but noticing the initial bubbling on the edge of the EML over Canada. Got to throw in that hand analysis, and there's some perils of hand analysis. I got a little carried away with the red pencil and misplaced the warm front slightly, but oh well, close enough, I guess. So I guess lesson learned: draw your warm front in erasable pencil first. So we fired up. 3 p.m. Virtual ops chat discussion. We've been trying that a lot more the past couple seasons as we've kind of gone to this telework state of being much more intentional about getting together in the afternoon over a hangout and going through the maps. It especially sets up the evening shift very well. So it kind of bridges the day shift to the evening shift. And we have our shift briefings, right? But being more intentional and a deeper dive into this, our evening shifts especially have really appreciated that. They feel when they walk into the door that they are really set up for success and have a really reduced spin up time. Getting back to some MIA concepts, noticing the impacts of, hey, the HER doesn't have this convection across Canada on the edge of the EML, and okay, so how do I need to adjust how I'm interpreting the HER downstream of that, right? So, and talking about throwing those updates into this chat as well. Again, the best practices of just keeping it simple, of remembering. I know I've always forgotten. Hey, we have international falls, but there's a whole lot of other soundings upstream from us, right? And very early on, recognizing the EML signature that was at Bismarck and Aberdeen. Big long photographs too, so just again, a lot of shear, strong mid-level lapse rates. Let's not overthink this kind of thing, especially when we lose the radar. So there it is. There's our EML signal. So this is a water vapor loop from kind of late morning through early afternoon. We can just see very clearly in the water vapor that very impressive elevated mix layer sitting up over us, and that initial convection that's starting to bubble over Canada, noticing that early. Hey, it's not going away, it's not going away, it's still hanging on, and eventually it turns into quite the whopper of a supercell in Grand Forks' area that eventually works its way into us. So again, foundational concepts, sticking to those, keeping it simple, big EML over us, we're on the gradient of it, that's where the action tends to happen. And really letting that guide us and not overthinking it. Big thanks to Tower S. They came through and saved me on getting some GLM data because we had some snafu with with the GLM being saved in our webs. So obviously GLM, big help, right? And a couple things that I got this idea from Alex Edwards at Bismarck, and of playing around with that GLM flash extent density color curve. So the full default color curve is at the top, and then the bottom one is limited to about 128, which is about half the range, which if you can say that logarithmically. But kind of playing around with that GLM flash extent density color map of taking the max value down. You can see, especially towards the end even at the beginning, but especially towards the ends of the loop, it just makes those signatures stand out so much more for your recognition of especially the upward trends in lightning density. So I've really, I think it's 256 or something like that for the top of the curve there on GLM flash extent density. Tamping that down to 128 for the, deep in the summer months, or even going lower than that if you're kind of on the shoulder seasons, to kind of make those signatures stand out. It is something that really, I think, worked pretty well in this case of trying to be our supplement for the radar data. And again, keeping it simple, keep it focused on the lightning trends, satellite trends. I don't have any real visible satellite loops because there's nothing overly new there other than what we already know in the aid of the Meso sectors. Minimum flash area was kind of a tricky one. I think we still need to, at least in our office and myself, need to work on how do we kind of best incorporate it. I mean, we all know kind of, we want those smaller flash areas, but we didn't find as much utility here. I'm not sure if it was just we didn't have the time, got distracted looking at it, or what do you do when everything is a small area? Is there, is it maybe we need to play around with the color curve to bring out smaller, more subtle changes in the signatures? But it was something that, it was there, but I think we need more time and practice kind of incorporating it into our workflows. We had such a quiet severe weather season up here anyways, probably just didn't have the chance anyways. But you can see that probably had a little more utility towards the end of the loop and a reinvigoration of our early morning convection, that some of the signals probably stood out a little bit more. But minimum flash area, MFA, probably need a little bit more time trying to incorporate that in our ops, and maybe we just need to play around with the color curve and make things stand out a little bit more too. It's always lovely when you have a whopper of a supercell just outside of your area that has it's tornadic, and you don't have your radar, right? And so you're about 105 to 115 nautical miles, and not in Minnesota apparently, nautical miles, sorry about that, from the KMVX radar on our western border. And okay, so we can see about 13 to 16,000 feet up. Got a history of producing a tornado, but yeah, the mesoscale environment that doesn't scream tornado, right? Obviously, it was supportive of supercells, but not screaming high-end tornado. So, well, time's running out. It's approaching our border. What do we want to do? Kind of in that modified 2 out of 3, and just go ahead and issue the thing. So we issued 2 tornado warnings. Never verified them. That's okay. It was a good idea to go ahead with them. There really wasn't much else to say that the threat hadn't been dramatically lower. It's still a high-end supercell, strong meso. You're only seeing the bottom 15,000 feet from Mayville until we could get any reports of anything not happening anymore, kind of stepping out, keeping it simple, lowering those confidence thresholds, which probably wouldn't be a whole lot lower anyways, just because in that part of our CWA, you're kind of far away from Duluth as well. So, and that was really good. One of our new hires, Crystal Cosson, awesome job, fresh out of rack this year, and she just did outstanding. And then we had Libra as well, another one fresh out of rack, new hire, working with higher graded forecasters, and they just adapted so well, rose to the challenge, saying, okay, I can't apply everything I learned in rack, I got to keep it simple, and they did a great job kind of adjusting their approach to warnings. So I'm really, really proud of them. What could have gone better from the event? One thing, and it's not maybe necessarily just having the radar down, but the Mesoanalyst role, continuing that into the overnight to kind of catch this track or a couple tracks here of this kind of re-intensification of the convection. We found that we start the Meso A early in the morning. It's great. We've got a lot of chats going on. We got hangouts. We've got map discussions. We get in the event and you kind of lose it, a little bit. And once you get too far into the event, so that's something that I think it's not just unique to this event, but trying to keep that Meso A role going deeper into the night or deeper into the event. It can be hard. It just gets distracting. You get pulled into other things. So trying to keep that as a standalone. So what went well, and then I'll pass it off to Joe for any additional comments, is, it really stressed a keep it simple approach to our warning operations. That, hey, you're going to have to adjust your confidence thresholds. You're going to have to intentionally warn on red, right? And kind of, okay, what's going to cause me to issue something? Well, we've got a great environment here for severe. So anything that shows a whole lot of an upward trend in satellite probably needs a warning, and we want to recalibrate that. But again, keeping it simple. That tornado warning. I mean, I wasn't at 80% or 40% probably confidence of a tornado there, but that probably didn't have to be there to keep that tornado warning going, just based on what we were dealing with there. And I think that was a good choice. Warning teams, big one, right? Especially, we called upon some of our new radar operators who are teamed up with really great experienced operators, and sectorizing. And you had to do it not only because we had a couple different areas going on, but also then you have Marine to throw in there. But boy, the use of warning teams, pairing them up, to build experience, and they did great, really outstanding in adjusting their approaches to this. I mean, you're come out of rack with all the tools, all these, and I can't use most of that. So they did a great job, keeping it simple and the communication. Good coordination. We did a hot wash after this, and a lot of these it just comes out of that document of good coordination with Minneapolis regarding how to operate their radar once the storms kind of got close enough of sales, meso sales, all that. So remembering to we're not just coordinating grids, but coordinating radar modes, not just VCPs, but specific deeper dive modes as well to give you the best looks that you can. And nothing new here, but successful use of goes east. Is essentially being our radar, right? And really playing around with some of those color curves as well to make signatures stand out a little bit more. We found to really be a big help. So out of the takeaways out of all this is kind of that modified 2 out of 3, and really keeping it simple and because you have to, and in a way. Maybe the event it's just in some ways easier because you have less data, and from that it just leads to kind of a different operating mode, but simpler, and definitely some good takeaways to apply when we do have a primary radar. So you've heard me talk for about 22 minutes. That's probably enough of me, and I'll pass it over to Joe for any comments.
Yeah, thanks, Patrick. So one of the things, just to re-emphasize something that I did think we did really well, was just from a human factors side, knowing, because we were able to have the benefit of going into this event, knowing that we didn't have the radar, we kind of on purpose probably overstaffed what we would have otherwise had, so that we had enough help on hand to make the warning decision process easier for the warning forecasters, and that includes using the kind of warning forecast pairs, where we've paired up a less experienced warning forecaster with a more experienced warning forecaster. From a technique side, one of the things that we kind of emphasize, something that we've kind of been emphasizing more this year, but especially during this event, something that we communicated to the warning teams, was making the warnings just long in terms of length of time and in terms of their size, because especially when they were going through rural areas, and most of our offices are rural, so you deal with this challenge anyway, even if you have great radar data, you're not getting new information 20-30 minutes down the line usually, because the storm hasn't hit anybody, and without much radar data, you're using kind of your neighboring radar data, satellite data, you might not have as much information. And so keep it simple, issue an hour severe, and let it ride kind of thing. Making that box, don't worry about micromanaging. Obviously, it depends on the storm mode, whether you can do this easily or not. We were lucky that these storms were kind of in a cluster, all kind of moving along the same line, and so it was easier to do this. But that's definitely something that helped reduce the workload, reduce the number of decisions the warning forecaster had to make. And then 2 things from a technical standpoint. One thing, just hopefully this talk serves as a reminder for those of you. Do all of your warning forecasters have procedures ready to go in case you lose your primary radar? So making sure that you have those procedures and all forecasters know where they are if they don't have them saved locally. Sometimes it's not as simple as just replacing your primary radar with your backup radar in there. And then as an asterisk to that, making sure that you have all of your RMR sets, your radar multiple request sets set up correctly, so that your radar focal point has set all that up so that you can request and get the higher resolution data into AWIPS. It's really important that you have all those technical things there so that your forecasters aren't fiddling around with cave settings or D2D settings, trying to make sure they get the radar data, making sure that everything is ready to go, and it all works. And then another technical thing, just to kind of reemphasize the MRMS complaint. I feel like this has been a constant issue since before MRMS, that we would love to have Canadian radar data, and having it in MRMS is not the answer, even when we can get the S-band radars in there. And this is just my opinion. It's really not. It will be great when the S-band radars get in there, but it should be widely known that basically at this point, the MRMS inclusion of Canadian radar data is not helpful because most of their radar network has been converted to the S-band, and that's only going to get more and more so over the next couple of years as they complete that dual pole upgrade that they're doing. But the other issue with this is that two issues that come up with the MRMS data and using that for your Canadian radar data access is, one, latency. There's obviously going to be a latency issue with MRMS. It's always going to be a few minutes behind just by its nature. And then when you add Canadian data into that, you've got multiple relays that it's got to go through, so multiple opportunities for delay. And two, remember that the MRMS data is kind of regridded on its own grid. It's not radial data. And because we're not getting radial data, it's going to be more difficult for us to use that for anything beyond kind of broad, hail heights and that sort of thing. It's really going to be hard to see a BWER on the MRMS data. So that's because of the nature of it, how it gets regridded and composited. It's good. It's a great tool to have. It's an excellent asset, but as far as being a replacement for Canadian radar data, it is not. So I'll get off my soapbox there.
Thank you, Joe. Great points on a lot of things. Especially the Canadian radar data challenge, and that's big, right? And it can certainly fill a lot of holes for us. And like you said, having those setups, we kind of had the luxury. It was probably actually easier knowing that we weren't going to have a radar than to have a radar and then lose it mid-event, where we could have the RB set up AWIPS wise to do that. And so I think that was somewhat of a luxury that we could it was easier just knowing going in we weren't going to have it, and so we could just get our mindsets and get our operational setups where they needed to be for that, than trying to turn that ship around when you kind of lose it during the event. So that's really all we have. So we will open it up to any questions. And Joe, thanks for kind of filling in the own gaps in my own presentation. So I appreciate that.
Thanks, Patrick. Thanks, Joe. Just awesome presentation. So many great takeaways. If you have a question or comment, please raise your hand or type it into the questions pane, and then I can relay it that way. Yeah, it's kind of a nightmare scenario, obviously, but I really like the planning and the foresight you guys had to kind of think through how the event was going to go down, and like your warnings to your polygon strategy and that sort of thing. I thought was really fascinating and well done. And you had so many good points, like coordinating with Minneapolis on the scan strategies and that sort of thing that could help you guys out as much as possible. So I really enjoyed that stuff. I thought that you made a lot of great points there. One question I had on the Canadian radar data is, do you guys look at that at all on an iPad through like Radar Scope or anything like that?
We can. We haven't purchased it because there were some transitions in the paperwork process of how that was done. And so now we have the right process. But so next fiscal year, we'll be able to have that. We had done that in the past. We had Radar Scope on our old iPad. But yeah, it's an option.
Yeah.
But again, it's like using any other third-party tool. It's not in AWIPS. It's harder to kind of use operationally. Obviously, RadarScript only has the first 4 tilts at best. So
yeah, it's certainly not ideal, and not like having it in your native display software and AWIPS. So I know that Central Region was trying to find a way so that it could be purchased through the Windows Store, which I think believe right now is where we can't do that right now, so you can only get it like on an iPad. But I know they were looking into try to find a way to work through that as well. But again, it's not in AWIPS. And that's just been a long-standing problem ever since I can remember trying to get that data in.
Yeah, and I fully realize that it's a multi-agency, multi-level, multi-bureaucracy issue. You've got us orders, you've got AWIPS, you've got SBN. There's so many issues, but it would be great to see that resolved. Yeah,
agreed. And I think, Joe, another thing, a point that you made near the end in your comments I thought was really great was, making sure that everyone has access to radar procedures, and that the RMR is all set up appropriately for such a situation when you really need it. Do you guys do radar procedures like at the site level, or do you just have your try to make sure that your forecasters all have those procedures available?
I'll defer that to Patrick.
Yeah, I think it's something that on the fly, we kind of have the ability to kind of make sure we're set up well. And I think as we go into the next season, it's something that we want to for sure have established at the site level. In the past, when me not being in the office, I miss being able to get all those perspectives set up at site level and things like that. So that's kind of been, just not having the access to AWIPS is tough. But it's definitely something that we want to make sure that as we move into the next season, that everyone, you got your MPX and your MVX and your MQTs all set up as much as you got your DLH, and so it's definitely something we're going to reinforce for next year.
Yeah, Patrick's done a lot of that kind of stuff for other things, for model looking procedures and some basic procedures. But yeah, it's just been, we're not in the office, so this wasn't a high priority need.
Right. Understand. So I've not seen any questions. Last call for questions. Please raise your hand or type into questions pane. The one last one that I would just maybe ask a question about, Patrick, was you talked about the GLM flash extent density. And did you just modify that color curve locally to go to 128, I think it was?
Yeah, so you just go, it's in the, I'm getting rusty now in my AWIPS knowledge, sitting in my basement too long, but you can change, you go change color map, and from there you can set your max and min values, and so that it just, go ahead, set it there, and you can, if you save it as procedure, it should save. And so I've done that with a lot of mine, where I've kind of tamped it down from 256 down to something lower. Just, our nature of our convection up here is a little different, so we kind of need a little bit more granularity at those lower flash densities. We just found that, as you can see from these loops, it just really helps things to stand out a lot more, and especially for marginal convection, you kind of get more of a gradation at the lower level. So that's something you just quickly go in and can adjust. Again, I'm not the author of that idea. I stole that from Alex Edwards and my colleagues at Bismarck. I saw it on a presentation, loved it, and tried it, and it worked well. So.
Okay. Yeah, it's very cool, because it really does make a big difference in the appearance. Obviously, it makes things jump out a lot more. This has just been an awesome presentation. There's so many good takeaways and lessons learned that I think other offices can apply from your experience. So thanks so much, Patrick and Joe, for coming on and sharing your material today.
No, absolutely, appreciate the opportunity, and I got to thank Lee Byerly at Towers S for bailing me out and getting me some GLM data. So big thanks to him, thanks to Joe, thanks to our office, did an awesome job, rose to the occasion. So.
Excellent. Thanks so much, guys. And we'll have next week, we'll be back for another guest speaker series with Dr. Patrick Market from the University of Missouri Columbia, talking about DK. So everyone have a great Wednesday, and hopefully we'll see you next week.